Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're going to continue our expose on developing the Piaffe. Today, with the idea of bringing horses into a little bit of a stretch in the Piaffe. Now, you see with Bailador here, as I start him, it's very normal sometimes for horses to get a little bit fractious, like you see him doing there a little bit and jumping up, especially for a horse like him. But watch how I'm bringing his neck forward, and watch how close his hind legs are getting to his front legs as I go. So my goal is to lengthen the entire neck forward while at the same time getting the horse to lift up through the back and lower behind, as opposed to just lower behind. Many people think that they start Piaffe with the horse's neck very, really high, and our goal is to make the horse sit down behind. Well, that's great. You can make a horse sit down behind, but you can also do that by pulling the neck too high and cranking the withers sort of backwards, which is why we see so many upper level horses today that have this kind of look like they have kind of developed hindquarters, but then of course there's always the hole behind the saddle and the neck is too high. So what I'm looking for here is to develop that neck coming forward and even into a stretch so that I can bring his hind legs up and forward and then bring the back up and then lower the hindquarters, which is what I want to have happen here. So he starts to get a little rhythmic there. I'm not asking for a big jump off the ground. All I'm looking for here is for him to begin to develop the neck forward, that is to stretch forward and bring the hind legs closer to the front legs and just begin to stretch and push up a little bit through the back like that, like you see him doing right there. And notice how relaxed he is in the reins and how close he gets together once again. Watch those front hind legs coming closer and closer. Notice also that I reward him. So we're going to do a couple of sessions of this when I work a horse like this. Now notice how completely relaxed he is. Now, of course, the problem is with the way people are being taught to teach Piaffe today of whacking horses in the front legs, they pull the head and neck way too high. So even if the horse does end up lowering behind, they do it, but the withers are cranked sort of backwards. So the horse has a dip behind the withers and then lowers his hindquarters. And that's not what we want. We want the horse to lift its back, let the neck come forward. So it always feels like a forward movement. So see how he starts out with the neck quite long here. And I just ask for that soft kind of movement there as he just begins to start to push off the back legs a little bit. But look how I let his neck come forward. Now watch as his neck comes forward, how much more the hind leg comes closer to the front legs. That's what I'm beginning to ask for. And yet elongate the neck forward as you see here, yet lowering the hindquarters behind while lifting the back at the same time. And that's the point that people need to get when doing this kind of work. As he begins to spring a little more off the hind legs. But my goal here is just to get him to come forward with the hind legs, keep that active rhythm, and then lift up through the withers and lift the back behind the saddle. There it is, right behind the withers, while yet doing this at the same time. So I keep a sense of the horse moving forward like that. Now from that, then we begin to bring the horse up a little more. Then we begin to bring the pole up once we have that position of the back and the hindquarters, not just the lowering. So now we're going to go on after taking a look at this horse. And once again, look how calm he is when I stop that. If you do this by holding on to horses' front ends, the way we see people doing, they're always trying to bolt away from you. So here's Perhaps. Now same thing here. I'm going to do this in a couple of sequences. I'm going to start by just getting her neck to come forward like this. And just like with the other horse, I want that neck to lengthen forward, yet the hindquarters to come closer to the front, like you see her doing there, starting to get a good rhythm and starting to bounce off the ground a little bit, starting to push. Remember, in a real Piaffe, the horse pushes off the ground, not just snaps its legs up in the air. And it always should have a sense of forward motion, like you see here. So I let her move forward and let the neck stretch forward and down a little more, just like that, till I get the active rhythm and really begin to get her to soften through the joints of the hind leg. So just like the other horse, I'll always do this in a few sequences. And I reward the horse each time. Now you notice I actually reward the horse before I start the Piaffe, which makes it, if you don't do that, then every time you start to bring him over to the rail, oh no, we're going to have to work real hard. So I want him to reward him first just for going to the rail and standing there. Now look this time how much softer this becomes. She begins to track even a little closer. She gets a little more active behind. And look how nicely she's stretching down. Now she's curling a little bit more than I'd like her to do there as she stretches down. So ultimately I want that stretching neck to come out. But she's a horse also that was broken in the third vertebrae and tends to do things like that as soon as you have a little bit of contact there. So I want to keep that moving like that, get the neck forward. Ultimately, I'd like her not to curl back a little bit as she did when she went down, But that's okay. She kept the rhythm nicely that time. Now, in the last attempt here, I'm going to get her to come forward with the neck, and then I'm going to bring the head and neck up. And then you'll see her keep the back up behind the withers there, and yet at the same time lower the hindquarters, which is our goal. Not just to lower the hindquarters. This idea that you can pull a horse back on the hindquarters, which we see some people trying to do today. Yes, you can get them active that way, but they end up hollow in front. She becomes more active here. Now look how much more springy that Piaffe goes. And look how long the neck is in front of her like that. Now from there, once I begin to get her more active, you see how she's really lowering the joints of those hind legs there. Still wants to curl a little behind the motion. That's just normal for her because she was so broken in the neck. That'll get straighter as I go on. We're just beginning to reestablish this work with her after coming back from her break and with her new owner, Barb. And notice how I always keep it moving forward. And you stretch even deeper and more active. So I'm not trying to get her to lower behind right now. That was all about getting her to lengthen the neck out and keep the concept of moving forward. Now in the last sequence here, I'll begin to bring her up. And notice how calm the horse stays throughout this. She's not getting in a lather. She's not excited. As soon as I stop the Piaffe, the horse just totally relaxes, and that's how it should be. Piaffe should never be taught, as something that the horse becomes nervous about. Now look here, she's starting to not curl so much there as I let her down, getting a good rhythm there. Now I start to bring her pole up right here. So I keep that good rhythm while I bring her pole up. If you see here, then she begins to lower behind and yet keeps that active step that's forward. And that's why I do the work that I do here like this. So the Piaffe always should have a sense of moving forward like you see here. Now I'm going to go back into the stretch again. So I let her go back down again, keeping that active rhythm. Like that. And once again, she wants to curl a little behind the bridle. That's just her, basically. I want her to stretch out and go straighter out with her head and neck. And that will come in time. Now here I bring her back up again. Now notice here she begins to lower the hindquarters. And look how engaged she is through the lower back behind the saddle there, if you see that. So that's what I'm looking for. So I want to keep that. So that's where the idea of getting that stretch and then to bring her up into this Piaffe, where now she brings her neck up, but notice how completely soft she is in the underside of the neck, as the horse should always be in all exercises. When you see ewe-necked horses, it's a very simple thing. They become ewe-necked for one reason. Now that's really beautiful there. She begins to lower. I ask it to move a little more forward, and I ask her to stretch back down again. Now this is quite a hard work, and this is a pretty long sequence of Piaffe here that I'm doing with her. So I let her just have that relaxed rein. And then I start to bring her back up again right there. That's what I'm looking for. So just like in the work in the mounted work when we ride horses and stretch them, we have to let the stretch come forward. Then we keep a good forward sense. Look how light she is in the rein, and yet the Piaffe is coming really nicely. She's beginning to really lower those joints behind. So that's what we're looking for.